Hello and welcome to Professor Pincushion. In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate on how to do a faced hem, also known as hem facing. This is a great technique to use if you're creating a garment that doesn't quite have enough fabric for a normal hem allowance, or you purchase a garment and it's just a touch too short, so you want to let out some of the hem. You can see my example right here. This is actually the inside of my skirt. Now I could take my main fabric, which is my black fabric here, hem it up to my normal hem, which is about here, but maybe it'll be just a little bit too short. So instead, I do the bare minimum, and then I substitute another strip of fabric to make up the majority of my hem. So I'm using as much of my skirt fabric as possible for the length. You can also use a contrasting fabric, so you add a little bit of fun inside your garment. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you need to do is you need to get your fabric for your facing. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this white muslin, and we need to start cutting out strips out of it, and it needs to be cut on the true bias. If you've ever seen our tutorial on how to make your own bias tape, it's a very similar process. I'm going to take my strip of fabric or my piece of fabric, and I try to make sure that all my edges are squared. You're going to take this corner here, and you're going to pull it over. You can either have this bottom edge meet this bottom edge, or just pull it enough so that they're parallel to each other. Now this is definitely a lot easier if you have a rotary cutter and mat, so I highly recommend it because then you can easily cut out the strips quickly. Now you can try to use this fabric to match your garment or have fun with it and make a contrasting fabric, so then it looks a little bit more playful on the inside. Once I have everything ready to go, I'm going to put this on my mat, get my rotary cutter, and then I'm going to start cutting strips. Now the width of the strips is really up to you on how wide you want to make it and how much you want to actually see on your garment. I'm just going to go ahead and cut 2-inch strips, and I'm just going to go ahead, cut a straight line. Again, because we did this, that makes it on the true bias. The first one I cut, because I have a fold line here, after I cut it, I can go ahead and cut it in half, and then I end up with 2 strips, and you end up with strips that look like this. The number of strips you're going to need really depends on the circumference of the hemline of the garment you're sewing this for. So everybody's going to be a little different. Just start off with maybe 3 strips, and then you can always add more strips if you need to. So here are my individual strips, and what I need to do is start sewing the ends of the strips together to form one long strip that I'm going to use for my facing. You always sew them right side to right side. So we're going to pretend with my muslin it really doesn't matter, but if you have a printed pattern, then have the right side up in one strip. You're going to take your next strip and you're going to lay it so it's going to be right side down. So they're right side together, and you're going to line up the edges, these edges here. Now it's not going to match, you're not going to do it so the point of this is going to line up with the edge and do the same thing. Your points are going to be off a little bit, because once you sew your 1/4 inch seam allowance and you actually press your seams open, you want to make sure that everything's going to line up. If you try to do point to point, it ends up being off a little bit. So I would definitely practice a little bit until it's lined up exactly right. So I'm going to pin this side, and then I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you do the seam allowance, you can press it open. Then I'm going to grab this other end, and if I need to, I can sew on another strip. So here is one that I created. You can see once I have my strip done, I can square the edge because you don't really need a point. There's one seam, sewing strip to strip, and there's my seam pressed open. Now this total length, again, depends on the circumference of your hemline. So what I like to do is, once I have a good size strip, I take my garment, which in my case is a skirt, and I start pinning it around the bottom of my skirt just to give me a general idea on how much I'm going to need. Now you do need to add at least 1 inch extra more than what the skirt is, because we're actually going to take these ends, we're going to place them right side to right side, and then we're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So then we have a nice round facing that we're going to put on the bottom of our skirt. I went ahead and sewed the two straight edges together at my 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I pressed it open. So now what I have is just one continuous piece, basically a circle that's going to fit the circumference of the bottom of my garment. Now I do want to point out, if you don't want to go through all the trouble of cutting strips and sewing strips together and doing all that, you can go ahead and buy pre-made bias tape, and I would just press it open so it's lying flat like mine is, but that would probably save you a little bit of work if you want to do that route. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do, on one side, doesn't matter which side, I'm just going to do the top edge. You're looking at the wrong side, the right side is on the inside. So on one edge, I'm going to turn over, we're going to say 1/4 inch. You can make it bigger if you want to make it bigger, but I'm just going to do 1/4 inch. Grab my pins here, so I can pin it into place, and I'm going to do this along the whole top edge. So I'd go all the way along here until I meet back to where my pin is. Whoops, that came out. After you finish doing that, you're going to go ahead and press it, and then we're going to move on to attaching it to our hemline. If you haven't already, you're going to let out the hem in your garment. So in this case, if you already sewed up your hem, you're going to take out all the stitches and then repress the bottom of your garment flat and open. So we're looking at the raw edge because we're going to be redoing the hem if you've already done it. Here is my facing piece. You can see it's all pressed along the top. I'm actually going to have my garment right side out. This is still inside out, or the wrong side out. And I'm going to be laying this right along the raw edge. So the raw edges are going to meet. Now my skirt happens to be folded in half, so I'm going to open up my skirt so I just have one single layer, and I'm going to go around the whole thing with right sides together. So you see the folded edges at the top, the raw edge here is meeting up with the raw edge down here. This seam, I'm just going to match up with one of my seams in my skirt. So in this case, just the center back seam. Grab my pins again, and I'm just going to start pinning all the way around the bottom of my skirt, making sure that everything is even, because now we're going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance down here at the bottom. I'm going ahead and doing my 1/4 inch seam. I'm doing a regular lane stitch. And after I finish it, I'm going to press my facing away from the bottom of my hem and press this seam I'm doing right now open. I finished sewing my seam. Now the white part, my facing, is pulled away from my skirt here. Here's the seam that I just did, and I pressed it open. And we're looking at the inside of the skirt here, so we're looking at the wrong side of everything. I have the edge of my skirt fabric here. This should be about 1/4 inch. And I'm going to fold right on this raw edge. So when I take my facing and it gets folded to the inside of the skirt now, you're going to have about 1/4 inch of your original garment fabric. Now what this means is, because we did a 1/4 inch seam allowance and then we folded over another 1/4 inch, now you're only losing a 1/2 inch at the bottom of your skirt instead of what you originally missed out on, whatever your hem allowance was. So for me it was 1.25 inches, and now I'm just losing a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to go ahead, fold this up all the way around my skirt and pin it into place, so then I'm able to sew my hem down. As another option, what you can do is you look at your skirt and you're like, wow, I really like having this contrasting piece at the bottom. I want to keep that. If that's something you want to do, I'm looking at the right side now of my skirt, and you want to keep this contrasting piece, therefore making your skirt even longer as an option, you're going to have to cut your strips even wider to begin with. So I originally cut my strips 2 inches in width, so maybe I want to cut them 3 inches instead. That way I have a little bit more play, because I still have to turn this part under somewhat in order to create a hem, because I can't just leave it like this. I need to still create my hem. And you don't want to give yourself too little of an amount, unless that's what you're looking for. You can really do as much as you want. But if you want a significant border on the bottom, then definitely when you cut your strips, cut them wider. After you pin your hem into place, go ahead and press this bottom edge here, just so everything looks nice and neat. So the top part of my facing now is the part I'm going to be hand sewing into place. I'm just going to be doing a hand blind hem because I think it looks the nicest. And I have a contrasting thread here, but definitely use a matching thread if you have it. So I'm going to start on the white facing part. I'm just grabbing a little bit right on that fold line because I want to make sure that my knot is going to be tucked behind there, so it's not really going to show that much. Then I'm going to grab a little bit of the black of my skirt here, and then I'm going to grab a little bit of the white part of the facing. And then go back and forth, so now it's back to the black skirt. Just grab a little bit, and then grab a little bit about the facing. So I'm just going all the way around until all the hem is sewn into place. If you want, you can also machine sew it if you want to do something quick. I want the hem on the right side of my garment to be a little bit more invisible so it'll look a little bit neater. But that's all you have to do in order to change your hem length for your garments and add your facing. New tutorials are released weekly, so please subscribe to be notified of the next release. Make sure to check out our other videos and visit ProfessorPincushion.com to view our complete library with well over 200 sewing video tutorials, including our exclusive premium content. Our premium membership is only $5 a month for unlimited access and only available at ProfessorPincushion.com. Also, don't forget to download our mobile app for videos on the go. Thanks for watching.